Caleb Clark found the dying volar beast sprawled in a pool of dark blood, alone and forsaken at the bottom of a deep ravine on planet Zephyria. The massive alien predator's breaths came in feeble gasps, pained eyes filmed over as its life seeped away from countless wounds. The planet's native Talarian aliens had left the creature they so feared to perish after it defended their settlement from a savage attack. Even in its last throes, the Talarians saw only a vicious, untamable monster. But Caleb saw something else. The human explorer had been captivated by Zephyria's lush jungles, towering crystal peaks, and exotic wonders since landing. But no sight compelled him to act like the mortally wounded volar. The fearsome alien beast embodied raw savagery, a muscular form bristling with claws and fangs that could eviscerate a man in seconds. To Caleb, however, this broken creature was no abomination. His human heart swelled with compassion for a magnificent being left to die alone. Caleb soon learned the tragic history of volars and Talarians, two sentient species who once coexisted on Zephyria. Generations of bloody conflict had poisoned hearts and minds on both sides. The Talarians drove the bestial volars into the wilderness as hated enemies of civilization. Only ingrained prejudice and fear stood in the way of the two peoples sharing their world again. As Caleb staunched the volars' wounds, he weighed the monumental task before him. Saving this creature meant far more than simply treating its injuries. He would have to find a way to shatter the Talarians' belief that volars were soulless monsters. He would need to prove this volar had a thinking, feeling mind deserving of empathy and respect. With no guarantee of success, Caleb was staking his own survival on redeeming the forsaken beast. Yet seeing the volar's fading ember of life, Caleb knew he could never turn his back on it. His humanity demanded he fight to save this broken creature, no matter how strange or savage it seemed. In the human spirit of compassion, so foreign to the bitter, battle-scarred Talarians, he found the strength to do whatever it took to rescue the dying volar and bridge the divide between two warring peoples. The perilous road ahead threatened to swallow Caleb whole, but he pressed on with grim resolve, determined that the majestic alien beast would live. Caleb rummaged through the medical supplies in his ship's cargo hold. He grabbed antiseptic, bandages, and anything else that might help the wounded volar. Rushing back to the ravine, he knelt beside the massive creature. The volar's eyes tracked Caleb's movements as he began cleaning the wounds. Its hide twitched at the sting of the antiseptic, but it made no aggressive motions. Instead, it let out a low, almost inquisitive growl. "Easy now," Caleb murmured. "I'm here to help." To his surprise, the volar seemed to understand. It settled, allowing Caleb to work. As he dressed the wounds, Caleb marveled at the volar's intelligence. It was a far cry from the mindless beast the Talarians made it out to be. Over the next few days, Caleb constructed a lean-to shelter around the volar, using branches and leaves. He brought fresh water from a nearby stream and hunted small game to feed the recovering creature. Slowly, the volar regained its strength. It began to rise and move about, always watching Caleb with a mix of curiosity and what almost seemed like gratitude. Caleb found himself talking to the volar as he tended to it, sharing stories of his adventures and his hopes for Zephyria. The volar listened intently, letting out gentle rumbles in response. A bond was forming, a connection that transcended the barriers of species and culture. But their peaceful interlude was shattered by the arrival of a Talarian delegation. Caleb heard their approach, the snap of twigs and rustle of underbrush heralding their coming. He stepped out from the shelter to find a dozen Talarians, armed and scowling, led by an imposing figure in ornate armor. "Human!" the leader spat. "You dare to consort with our enemy?" Caleb held up his hands in a placating gesture. "The volar is not an enemy. It's a living being in need of aid." The Talarians bristled. "Aid? You would help the creature that has slaughtered our kind for generations?" "And how many volars have the Talarians killed?" Caleb shot back. "This cycle of violence, it's all born of misunderstanding. I'm trying to show a different way." The leader stepped forward, hand on his weapon. "The only way is to destroy the volars. And if you stand with them, human, You are no better than they are. Caleb refused to budge. I won't abandon a creature in need. If you can't see the potential for peace, then I pity you. The Talarians drew their weapons, rage etched on their faces. But before they could act, the Volar emerged from the shelter. It moved to stand beside Caleb, placing itself between him and the armed Talarians. It made no aggressive moves, simply standing tall and proud, a silent guardian. The Talarians gaped in shock. Never had they seen a Volar act in defense of another, let alone an alien creature. Do you see? Caleb said softly. The Volar doesn't want to fight. It's choosing to protect, not destroy. The leader stared at the Volar, confusion warring with a lifetime of ingrained hatred. This changes nothing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It changes everything, Caleb countered. It's proof that Volars and Talarians are not doomed to be enemies. He gestured to the Volar at his side. If we can find common ground, there's hope for both your kinds to share this world in peace. The Talarians exchanged uneasy glances. The sight of the Volar standing with the human had shaken their certainties. We will bring your words to our council, the leader said grudgingly, but do not expect them to be well received. With that, the delegation turned and retreated into the jungle, leaving Caleb and the Volar alone once more. As the Talarian delegation disappeared into the dense jungle, Caleb turned his full attention to nursing the Volar back to health. Each day brought new challenges and small victories. He cleaned the beast's wounds, changed its bandages, and coaxed it to eat the native fruits and small game he gathered. The Volar's recovery was slow but steady. Its wounds closed, its strength returned, and its eyes grew brighter. Caleb spent hours simply sitting with the creature, talking to it in a low, soothing voice. To his amazement, the Volar began to respond. A tilt of the head here, a low rumble there. It was as if the creature was learning to understand him. One morning, Caleb woke to find the Volar standing over him, not menacing but protective. When he rose, it followed him to the stream where he gathered water. As Caleb knelt to fill his canteen, the Volar suddenly tensed, its gaze fixed on the undergrowth. A moment later, a venomous Zephyrian snake burst forth, fangs bared. Before Caleb could react, the Volar's massive paw swatted the snake away, saving his life. Weeks passed in this manner, the bond between man and beast growing stronger each day. Then, just as Caleb was considering how to approach the Talarian settlement, visitors arrived at his camp. A group of Talarians emerged from the jungle, led by a tall, imposing female. Her armor was more ornate than the others, marking her as a leader. She introduced herself as Korvax. Human, she said, her voice a mix of wariness and curiosity. Our council has deliberated on your words. We wish to extend an overture. Caleb stood, the Volar at his side. I'm listening. Korvax's eyes flicked between Caleb and the Volar. We propose you both return with us to our settlement for formal negotiations. Caleb weighed the risks and opportunities. This was the chance he'd been waiting for. We accept, he said finally. The journey to the Talarian settlement was tense. The Talarian guards kept their weapons trained on the Volar, but the creature remained calm under Caleb's gentle guidance. Korvax watched this interaction with barely concealed fascination. As they approached the settlement gates, a crowd gathered. Murmurs of fear and anger rippled through the Talarians at the sight of the Volar. Some reached for weapons, others backed away in terror. Caleb raised his hands. Please, remain calm. The Volar means you no harm. To demonstrate, he placed his hand on the Volar's massive head. The creature leaned into his touch, letting out a contented rumble. The crowd fell silent, amazed. Inside the council chambers, Caleb made his case. The cycle of violence between your peoples must end, he urged. I propose a program to rehabilitate Volars, to show them and you that coexistence is possible. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Spare resources on our enemies? One scoffed. Preposterous. But then Korvax spoke up. I've seen what this human has accomplished, she said. The Volar at his side is proof that change is possible. A heated debate erupted. Caleb and Kurvax argued passionately for their cause, while others vehemently opposed it. Hours passed before a consensus was reached. "We will permit a trial," the head counselor announced grudgingly, "but under the strictest conditions." With the council's approval, Caleb, Kurvax, and a small team set to work. They established a secure facility on the outskirts of the settlement to house captured Volers. Caleb applied the same techniques he'd used with his Voler companion, but progress was slow and frustrating. The newly captured Volers lashed out in fear and anger, their hatred of Talarians deeply ingrained. Caleb's team suffered bites and scratches, but he urged them to persist with gentle, consistent care. Days turned to weeks. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, changes began to occur. A Voler accepted food from a Talarian's hand without snarling. Another allowed itself to be touched without flinching away. Caleb's original Voler companion played a crucial role, demonstrating to both species that trust was possible. Its calm demeanor in the presence of Talarians served as a constant example to the other Volers. There were setbacks, violent outbursts, escape attempts, team members quitting in frustration, but there were also breakthrough moments that kept hope alive. A young Voler learning to communicate through a series of gestures, an older one allowing a Talarian child to approach without showing aggression. As the months wore on, the reintegration process inched forward. It was far from perfect, fraught with challenges, but it was progress. And for Caleb, that was enough to keep going, to keep believing that peace between Volers and Talarians was possible. Caleb's hopes for peace crumbled as the situation spiraled out of control. Whispers of discontent turned to shouts of outrage as Talarian hardliners protested the Volers' presence. "They're monsters!" one man yelled during a town meeting. "How can we sleep at night with those beasts so close?" Despite Caleb's impassioned pleas for understanding, the divide only widened. Fights broke out in the streets. Voler enclosures were vandalized with hateful graffiti. The fragile alliance teetered on the brink of collapse. Then came the night that shattered everything. Caleb jolted awake to the sound of alarms blaring. He sprinted toward the Voler compound, heart pounding. The scene that greeted him was chaos, fences torn down, cages ripped open. A group of Talarians wielding clubs and torches rampaged through the enclosure. "Stop!" Caleb screamed, but his voice was lost in the mayhem. He watched in horror as his Voler friend, the first he'd ever rescued, leapt in front of a group of younger Volers. The creature roared defiantly as club blows rained down. By the time security forces arrived to subdue the attackers, it was too late. Caleb cradled his dying friend's massive head, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I failed you." The Voler's eyes met his, filled not with hatred, but a profound sadness. It let out a final rattling breath and went still. All around, enraged Volers lashed out. They smashed equipment and lunged at any Talarian in sight. Years of progress unraveled in minutes. "Everyone stop," Caleb shouted, positioning himself between the warring factions. This isn't what he would have wanted. But the Volers were beyond reason, driven by grief and fury. Caleb braced himself as a massive male charged, fully expecting to be torn apart. Then a miracle occurred. The fallen Voler's body began to glow with an ethereal light. A haunting, otherworldly sound filled the air. The rampaging Volers froze, transfixed. In that moment of silence, Caleb understood. This was his friend's final gift, a chance to salvage everything they'd worked for. "Listen to me," Caleb pleaded. "Your brother gave his life protecting others. Don't let his sacrifice be in vain. We can still build the future he dreamed of, but only if we choose a different path. Please, stand down." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, one by one, the Volers backed away. The glow faded, leaving only stunned silence in its wake. As dawn broke, Kurvax surveyed the aftermath with grim eyes. "This experiment of yours has brought nothing but death," she spat. "It ends now. We're shutting it all down." Caleb, exhausted and heartbroken, found one last reserve of strength. "If we give up now, We're no better than those who attacked us. We're letting fear win. My friend believed in a better future. Are you really going to throw that away? Kervax's face softened. She looked from Caleb to the subdued Volers, then back again. You truly think we can move past this? Caleb nodded. It won't be easy, but it's the only way forward for both our peoples. After a long moment, Kervax straightened her shoulders. Then we keep going, for your friend, for all of us. As the sun rose higher, Caleb and Kervax began the arduous process of rebuilding. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time in ages, there was genuine hope for lasting peace between Volers and Talarians. As dawn broke over the settlement, Caleb and Kervax surveyed the wreckage of their dreams. The charred remains of the Voler enclosures smoldered, a grim reminder of the previous night's violence. Caleb's hands shook as he lifted a piece of twisted metal, his face etched with exhaustion and sorrow. We can't give up, Kervax said, her voice hoarse from shouting orders through the chaos. Your friend's sacrifice can't be for nothing. Caleb nodded, swallowing hard. You're right. We need to regroup, fortify what we have left. Over the next weeks, they worked tirelessly. New security measures went up, reinforced barriers, round-the-clock patrols, and strict screening protocols for anyone entering or leaving the compound. The surviving Volers huddled in makeshift shelters, their eyes wide with fear and distrust. Caleb spent hours each day with the traumatized creatures, speaking softly, offering food by hand. Progress was painfully slow. A young Voler, its hide still bearing scars from the attack, finally accepted a morsel from Caleb's palm after days of coaxing. It was a small victory, but Caleb clung to it fiercely. As months dragged on, the situation grew increasingly volatile. Caleb woke one morning to find anti-Voler graffiti scrawled across the compound walls. That afternoon, a Talarian guard was found unconscious, claw marks raking his back. Tensions ratcheted higher with each incident. We're losing control, Kervax warned during a late-night strategy session. The hardliners on both sides are gaining support. Caleb ran a hand through his unkempt hair. We need a breakthrough, something to show everyone that coexistence is possible. But breakthroughs remained elusive. Instead, acts of sabotage escalated. Food stores were poisoned, water supplies contaminated. Casualties mounted on both sides, each death fueling cries for vengeance. Then came the day that pushed everything to the brink. Caleb was in the lab poring over medical data with a reformed Voler who had shown an aptitude for science. An alarm blared, shattering the quiet. Biohazard alert, a voice screeched over the intercom. Unknown pathogen detected in sectors 3 through 7. Caleb's blood ran cold. He sprinted from the lab, donning a protective suit as he ran. Outside, chaos reigned. Talarians and Volers alike stumbled through the streets, coughing violently, some already collapsing. It's airborne, Kervax shouted, her voice muffled by a breathing mask. We need to contain it. But containment proved impossible. The bioweapon, clearly engineered to target Volars, spread with terrifying speed. Within hours, both species were falling ill, their bodies unable to cope with the rapidly mutating virus. Caleb and Kervax barricaded themselves in the main research facility with a handful of scientists, both Talarian and Voler. They worked frantically, analyzing the pathogen's structure, searching for weaknesses. We're running out of time, Kervax said, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The death toll is rising exponentially. Outside, the situation deteriorated further. Militant factions, seeing their chance to end the conflict once and for all, launched all-out assaults. The sound of explosions and weapons fire echoed constantly. Days blurred together as Caleb and his team fought their desperate battle against the clock. They tested countless potential cures, each failure driving them to work harder, push further. Reformed Volers worked alongside Talarian scientists, their differences forgotten in the face of mutual extinction. Finally, after a breakthrough that left them all weeping with exhaustion and relief, they had it, a viable countermeasure. But as Caleb looked at their pitiful stockpile, realization dawned. There wasn't enough for everyone, not nearly enough. He stared at the vials, the weight of an impossible choice crushing down on him. The sounds of battle grew closer. They were out of time. Caleb's hand trembled as he reached for a syringe. He knew what he had to do.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.